Hey guys, in this video I have some beginner tips for improving your portraits. Now, I planned this video with beginners in mind. A lot of these tips are correcting mistakes that I've seen beginners make. But even if you've been shooting portraits for a while, stick around. There might be one or two tips in here that are helpful. Tip number one, when you're shooting portraits, make sure you're looking at your entire frame and everything else in your frame that's not your subject. In portrait photography, you have a lot going on. You have to interact with your subject and compose your image. Think about your lighting, the expression on your subject's face. It's easy to get caught up and just kind of get tunnel vision on the face of the person that you're photographing, and you start to forget other parts of your frame. And you might accidentally put someone in front of a tree or a sign or something sticking out of their head, sticking out of their body, or you're not composing that person within the image to get a balanced frame. You're too focused on the person. So when I'm shooting portraits, I make sure that I'm looking, typically I'll look at my subject and then kind of quickly check all four corners of my frame, make sure I don't have weird stuff in my image that I'm not noticing because I'm too focused on the person. All right, tip two is kind of in line with composition stuff. I try to put my subject's eye or put my subject on the thirds of the frame. You've probably heard the rule of thirds. You divide your frame top to bottom in thirds and side to side in thirds. And I don't always put my subject's face right on a third intersection in this frame. That's where I'm at right now, right on one of the thirds. But I try not to have my person dead center like this. You get too much room above their head. I probably look ridiculous to cars that are driving by. Too much room above their head, a lot of room on the sides. So I like to put their eye line kind of on that upper third. Another thing to pay attention to, I try not to get the eye line and the horizon both on that third. If things are too lined up and the horizon's kind of coming in right in line with your subject's eyes, it feels a little weird and off balance. So I try and separate those so that you have layers in your photo. Now, the rule of thirds is not a super strict rule. Sometimes it makes sense to center your subject and really drive the focus right into the middle of the frame. But in general, if your photos, your portraits are looking a little flat and not as much, they don't have movement, you don't find your eye moving around the frame of the image, bump your subject up to one of the third lines, off to the side, something like that. Maybe balance something else in the frame compositionally on the other third line. It just makes more dynamic portraits. Tip three is to soften up your light source. Often I see beginner portrait photographers just heading out to shoot in whatever light they can find. And a lot of times that's a hard bulb indoors or midday sun outside. And that sort of direct, harsh lighting is really tough on the skin, and it casts hard shadows under your eye sockets and from your nose. So if you soften up your lighting, it really helps your subject. It evens out skin tones, it hides blemishes a little bit, and you just get nice, even, flat lighting on the face. Some of the easiest and cheapest ways to soften your light are to shoot indoors near a north-facing window or any window where the sun is not directly shining in it. You'll get nice, soft, directional light coming from that window. You can get a cheap fold-out diffuser for like 30, 40 bucks on Amazon. You can hold that in between the sun and your subject, and you'll get nice, soft, diffused light through that diffuser. You can also move out of direct sunlight and work in the shade, and that'll give you much softer light for your subject. Another tip for the light in your portrait work, try playing around with some warmer white balance settings. You might do this in your editing program if you're shooting raw, or instead of shooting daylight white balance, try shooting on cloudy or shade. It'll just give you nice warm tones, which really helps people's skin tone. A lot of my portrait work is shot a little bit warmer than what's technically correct. All right, tip number five, practice your portraits in low stress scenarios. If you're new and you're not super confident in your skills, don't find someone you've never met and go downtown where there's a bunch of people driving around, walking around, they're watching you take photos and you feel awkward the whole time. You already have enough to think about with portrait work. And along these same lines, I normally tell people to have one or two go-to options for posing, lighting, jokes that you tell to kind of break the ice. Just a couple things that you can rely on to at least get 1 or 2 good photos. Then if you meet someone new or you're shooting somewhere where things are hectic or you feel a little awkward, you can always do those couple of things that you feel comfortable with and at least get the photo shoot started on the right path. Get a few good photos under your belt and then start experimenting with new stuff. One of the go-tos that I use for a lot of the headshot work that I do is I'll tell people to grab their own wrist, because people never know what to do with their hands. Grab your own wrist, stand up nice and tall, think like a string is pulling the top of your head up, and then turn your shoulders so you're not facing directly at camera. And that looks pretty good. And then I'll normally direct them how to turn their chin, bump your chin up a little bit, turn your shoulders a little more, and you can kind of tweak it from there. But that setup gives them something to do. They don't feel nervous and awkward in front of the camera, and you can kind of get things flowing. On the subject of posing, my next tip is don't overpose your subjects. If you're going for something very specific, sure, but generally as a beginner, you're probably not working with very experienced models, and so the people you're shooting with are gonna feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. And as you start to pose and tell them to do specific things, it starts to look a little stiff. And so I just try and get people comfortable, joke around, have some fun, and let people just naturally fall into a pose that's comfortable for them. And you can direct them a little bit. I'll say, you know, a lot of times I'll hop in front of the camera and just show them what I want them to do. Say, you know, sit on this bench and kick your leg out like this. And then just see what they do. And maybe you direct things here and there. But in general, you want to direct the mood and the emotions of the shoot, not specifically what that person is doing with their right hand and their left hand. Just kind of let things flow. This next tip is a two-parter. Get yourself a wide aperture 50mm or 85mm lens. Normally you can find f1.8 versions of those lenses for a couple $100, but it's gonna let you get that nice blurry background with the subject in focus. It's gonna give you a lot more background separation of your subject and your background than a zoom lens or a kit lens will. Part 2 of this tip is experiment with non-portrait lenses. Shoot some wide-angle portraits, shoot some portraits at a really long telephoto length, and just play around with focal lengths and different looks. You'll notice that shooting on a wide angle, you have to get close to your subject, but you're also getting a lot more of the background. And so maybe you like that for indoor environmental portrait photography, or maybe you want to shoot really tight headshots and you're shooting at like 135mm focal length and you're just getting head and shoulders, backgrounds completely out of focus. Experiment, and you might find different styles that you didn't think you would like. Next on my list is learn off-camera lighting. That's easier said than done. This is a huge, complicated part of photography, but learning off-camera lighting is really gonna open up so many creative options for your portraits. Really beautiful natural light is awesome, and it's great to shoot in, but it's also rare. Learning off-camera lighting will really let you create the kind of light that you want in your image. If you look at my website and look at a lot of my portrait photography, almost all of it is shot with some form of off-camera lighting. And having those lighting skills will really open up options if you start to work with clients. A lot of times, clients can't shoot at golden hour. You have to shoot midday, you have to shoot in bad light. Having this off-camera lighting knowledge really helps you go into a shoot with much more confidence. You just know, okay, I can get a well-lit headshot in any conditions. The next few tips are about what happens after the shoot. Next on the list is cull your images. After a shoot, I see a lot of beginner photographers adding 20, 30 images from a shoot into their portfolio. You really should narrow it down to 1 or 2 of the best images. If you go look at my website, you can't really find multiple photos from the same shoot, maybe here and there, but typically I'm picking like 1 or 2 images from a shoot that are portfolio worthy, and that's it. It's a hard thing to do because as you shoot, you're trying new things, you're getting excited, you figure out off-camera lighting and you love all the images that you make from a certain shoot, you want to share them all, really take your time narrowing it down to just the strongest images. And to do that, I'll typically go through a shoot right after it happens or when it's still fresh in my mind. I'll pick out some of my favorites, take a couple day break, go back to it, just look at those favorites, and just try and get rid of the weakest few images. And maybe I repeat that process over and over a couple times till I really just have the strongest 1 or 2 images from that shoot. Next tip, practice your editing. I recommend that you shoot your photos in RAW. I talk about white balance earlier in this video. If you're shooting RAW, you can tweak that white balance after the shoot and kind of warm up your images, cool them down, figure out a look or style that you like. But shooting RAW will allow you way more room to edit your images after. I know a lot of people argue, oh, you should get everything right in camera, you shouldn't have to edit your images. But editing an image on a computer is part of the image making process. This digital camera is part of the toolkit that you use to make an image. Your computer and your editing programs are the other part of the toolkit. If you just shoot JPEG and you say, oh, I get everything right in camera, you're letting the camera decide how to edit your images. You're not getting a blank slate image from the sensor unless you're shooting RAW. And so I don't like that argument. You're just giving over creative control to the camera. It's still being done to the image. I would rather be in control of that and edit my images the way I like them. And then my final tip, and probably one of the hardest ones, is to practice subtlety in your portrait work. And I'm talking about editing, I'm talking about lighting, composition. It's very easy, especially when you learn off-camera lighting, to overpower your scene with your main flash and things look very flash lit. Or when you're editing, it's very easy to overdo your editing, especially when you're new, and get contrast, get saturation, get weird skin tone colors. So practicing subtlety will help your portrait work. And when I'm editing, I'll typically move a slider past where I want it and then tone it back and do a lot of edits kind of stronger than I want them to be in the end and slowly bring them back. And same with my lighting. I really try and balance my lighting well with the natural light. Subtlety, it's very easy to kind of overdo it. And sometimes you want to be bold with your photography, and sometimes there's beauty in that subtlety. So those are all the tips I have for you guys. It is starting to snow, and so I am going to pack it up and head home. If these were helpful, please let me know down in the comments, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.